It has been a hot minute since I talked about Jujutsu Kaisen. Please do not come for me. I legit simply don't have the time to talk about this series and Kagurabachi both at the same time in the same weekend. It's just not physically possible. However, it's been good to let the chapters build up, see what Gege and Yuji are cooking here. And I gotta say, I'm not disappointed so far. So, without further ado, it's time for me to glaze chapter 5.
Like, I hate wasted potential. That shit crushes your spirit. It really does. It crushes your spirit.
Chapter 5 opens up where Chapter 4 left off with the reveal that this kid that Yuka and Tsurugi were quote-unquote helping is actually just a creepy-ass old man wearing a kid's skin, which I say that sentence out loud and I think to myself, what the fuck am I doing with myself here? Why have I just said that out loud? But this dude is a creepy old man who is apparently a grade 1 sorcerer, and his dialogue actually kind of reminds me of a little bit, but I will get to that soon, I promise. But first things first, we got this opening of the chapter, which left me fairly confused. As we can see, it's a girl who is being called by her mother, and she's mighty concerned that her water and her glass are now just floating through the air. Now, we've not actually seen either of these two within the series so far as I'm aware, but the way the panel's laid out is as if Maru is dreaming about this encounter. And one of the reasons I say this is because at the end of the chapter, we're given this panel of Maru waking up ominously while everything floats around him in a very similar manner to what's happening to this little girl. So that begs the question, just who is this little girl? An idea that I had is that maybe it is someone from potentially Maru's past here, maybe a little sister, perhaps a daughter. I know obviously Maru is supposed to be in Earth years 19. He is obviously Yuka and Tsurugi's senpai, I suppose. But we don't know how their customs work on Alien World, on the Sumerian planet, who fucking knows. Whatever it is, it had Maru waking up something fierce, but we will talk about that towards more of the end of the video here. Anyways, we are thrust into the fight between Tsurugi and this Chaos user, and I'm just going to say it, this fight reminds me so much of the Culling game. I felt like I was watching Megami or Yuta run the gauntlet or screwing up. It genuinely is just refreshing to see Gege back in his bag when it comes to new Chaos techniques, as we get the name for this Chaos user's technique, which is Mama Raid Boy, or according to TCB, it can be translated directly as Mother Spirit's Cruel Abuse, which is interesting. But this spirit, or Shikigami, whatever it is here, reminds me of Judgman, the way it lurks behind the Chaos user very, very ominously. There's lots of callbacks within this series, and I will obviously keep going over them. Anyways, these two start swapping hands here, and Tsurugi quickly notices just how strong this dude actually is. Now, again, the topic of strength has been something that I've seen a bit of debate within this community. From what I've seen, most people seem to be of the opinion that Modulo, it would be overall at present weaker in a cast sense than its predecessor of Jujutsu Kaisen, purely based on the fact that Gojo and Sukuna are like no longer present, and the world as it is right now seems to be sort of in a peaceful time, like and the result of obviously Gojo and Sukuna's fight and just Sukuna's presence in general is sort of warding away spirits, you know what I mean? So that begs the question, is this dude actually a grade 1 sorcerer? You know, the same rank as fucking Nanami here? So what do you think the level of like grade 1s has changed over the years here? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. What I will say here is that the Chaos user puts pressure onto Tsurugi here. Now remember, Tsurugi is following the violent, blood-soaked footsteps of Maki. He is heavily restricted with 0 Chaos energy, something that our Chaos user actually notes during this fight. However, it is here where we get some interesting dialogue between Tsurugi and our Chaos users. The Sukuna dialogue that I was referencing at the beginning of the video, where Tsurugi asks him, did it ever occur to you that you could use these abilities to help others? Which is, again, very shades of Yuta coming out here, reminded me of a conversation that Yuta and Uro had during their fight. Again, there is so many callbacks. If you've read the series a lot, like I have, you'll notice a pattern. There's a lot of like, ooh, that feels like a callback, that feels like a callback, this feels like a callback. You'll see it. But this Chaos user replies, I'm sure I gave it some thought at some point, but it must have been when I was younger. One's sensitivity gradually dulls with age, and in time, you too will feel nothing, whether you're saving lives or taking them. And it's this line of dialogue that did 2 things for me personally. One, it reminds me about the brutality of the world of Jujutsu sorcery. It's unforgiving, and the people who wield these powers can come across cold and unfeeling simply because of the world that they live in. 2, it reminded me of Sukuna. It reminded me of Sukuna heavily. You see, towards the end of Jujutsu Kaisen, Yuji and Sukuna had a conversation at the back end of their fight. A conversation that sort of really hammered home the stubborn nature of Sukuna, I think. Despite Yuji's best efforts, Sukuna simply didn't feel anything towards what he was being told. And when you compare Sukuna to this line of dialogue from the Chaos user here, you really get to see those similarities shining through. Both the Chaos User and Sukuna have lived a long life. Both the Chaos User and Sukuna have dual sensitivities. Both the Chaos User and Sukuna feel nothing when it comes to taking or saving a life. And it makes me wonder that if on a long enough timeline, that's sort of the fate for all Jujutsu sorcerers, to ultimately become this sort of cold and sort of indifferent powerhouse, I guess. I mean, after all, they are famously not heroes. They are Jujutsu sorcerers, just as Megami told Yuji all those years back. Now, I'm sure I've mentioned this, but Jujutsu Kaisen in and of itself is sort of a story of cycles, and Modulo genuinely feels as if we are treading old familiar ground. And that's exactly what this Chaos User is doing in his old age here. He's decided that the best way for him to live is to repeat the first grade over and over and over and over again. And while it is very, very fucking creepy, it's his way of trying to capture that feeling of youth and wonder that he once had. However, it's here that we are actually treated to the reveal that our Chaos User isn't quite all there anymore. His mind is actually collapsing due to his age, which is why the chapter is actually called Senality. And obviously, he begins to repeat his previous statement in response to Tsurugi's question. Now, what I do like about this segment is not only the themes of sorcery and obviously how it feels like it's calling back to previous stuff in the story, but it's the visual storytelling that's going on. As the Chaos User is walking towards Tsurugi here, his head is shrouded in darkness, and it's as if it's signifying the cloudiness of his mind as the world is literally warping around him even more, like, confusingly, I guess. And it's here that the mask literally cracks for him, torn between his sort of ambitions and his actual reality. And it's this visual storytelling that I'm really, really fucking with. I've already talked about this plenty of times now, but I actually genuinely, it's a close call for me on whose artwork I prefer, whether I prefer Gege's or Iwasaki's here. He's definitely made an impression on me, personally. Now, the fight continues between the two as the Chaos User charges in, with Tsurugi activating a brand new Simple Domain technique. New Shadow Style, Simple Domain Spots. Now, we don't actually get an explanation for how this works here, but based on how it looks, I would say it operates as a regular Simple Domain, but has many different spots for Tsurugi to stand in, allowing him to move around the battlefield, which in turn would be an improvement on the regular Simple Domain, rather than standing still and being forced out of the area in a manner similar to what Maki did with Miwa, forcing her feet to move. However, I do wonder if these spots only allow the user to move in a manner similar to a chess piece based on the way that they're laid out. Let me know your theories on the Simple Domain in the comments down below. I will also say that in regards to the Chaos techniques so far, with what we've seen for 5 chapters deep, Gege doesn't seem too interested in explaining them. He's just sort of like, yeah, okay, here's what's going on, that's it, done. You know, and when we think about what happened with Jujutsu Kaisen, maybe later on down the line we'll get like deeper explanations for these Chaos techniques, but I think maybe because this is like a prequel or a sequel series, maybe he's just sort of like, you guys know the fucking drill here. This Chaos technique's gonna be crazy, here's what it is, right? You know what I mean? Figure it out yourself, I guess. Anyways, this Chaos User actually notes that Tsurugi is from one of the old Big Three families, noting how he's bound by heavenly restriction and has insane physical abilities in exchange for Chaos energy. But even so, Tsurugi, being able to use the Chaos energy from the sword, was able to open up a Simple Domain, and that is incredible. This actually kind of reminded me of Maki using Dragon Ball when she was fighting the Zenin clan, but like I suppose this is sort of on a higher level, I guess. Anyways, this Chaos User actually gets knocked from the roof here, and it's here that he falls into the trap of Mino, who activates a veil in order to protect the area that these guys are fighting in. Now, I mentioned again how I've talked about this, and I'll probably carry on talking about this in every single Modulo video that I make here, is that Jujutsu Kaisen runs in cycles, and the events seem to repeat themselves. Now, I'd like you all to go back and reread Jujutsu Kaisen 0, from where Yuta goes on his first mission, and tell me if you're in the same thoughts that this scenario, this area, reminds you of where Yuta and Maki had their first mission, with Gojo stood outside dropping the veil and watching. Anyways, Yuka pulls up and uses her bite and twist cursed technique to catch the Chaos User off guard here, and it's here that the Okotsu siblings simply put the fucking beating on this dude. Now, again, I really fuck with this art style. Yuji Iwasaki is doing an absolutely phenomenal job putting the visual style to Gege's words here, and this panel in general just genuinely reminded me of Yuji and Nobara hitting that black flash. I think it's the way the composition is laid out here. Anyways, Yuka and Tsurugi knock out the Chaos User, or at least that's what they think that they have done. It turns out that this dude is still alive and very much well as he raises from underneath his guardian. It turns out he can basically clone himself, I guess, like a shadow clone style, I suppose. However, he lands 1 strike on Yuka and 2 on Tsurugi. Now, I think it's an important detail here to notice the change in his weaponry here. The head of the needle becomes flatter where it was originally able to be threaded, and I checked both needles for both the Chaos User and his Shikigami here. They're both needles that are able to be threaded, but now this needle is like a flat head, so I wonder if this is a change in tactics, potentially maybe a poisonous needle, I guess. After all, we all know that poison is hard for anyone with a reverse curse technique to sort of deal with. Not that I think Yuka and Tsurugi have this. Well, I mean, Tsurugi definitely doesn't have this, but I don't think Yuka has this at their level. But it could just be the curse user being overly cautious. I mean, this dude's an old dude, so it wouldn't hurt him to be cautious in this regard. However, it's here that the chapter does come to a close, showing Maru, who'd been knocked out, with his eye staring down the curse user as things start to float around him. The symbolism here of the skull and the bones and the earth rising up around us is very, very cool. Remember, this curse user had buried quite a few bodies here, men, women, and children. He was indiscriminate against his victims here. Now, it's almost like we are being told that death is rising here, so whatever Maru is about to do, I have a feeling that he is not going to be in total control of his actions, I guess. So I'm very, very excited to see what Maru does, because it is also worth mentioning that Maru, whenever he activates his curse technique, his brother is going to be aware of this. So there's got to be some sort of give and take in terms of the curse technique. And I am very, very curious to see how curse techniques work with twins, with the Sumerians. Obviously, with twins in Jujutsu Society on Earth, one has a curse technique and one doesn't, like obviously Maki and Mai. And the curse technique for Mai was fairly weak. The cursed energy reserves were fairly weak, so I wonder if that's the same sort of give and take between Maru and Cross here. Anyways, that is everything from me. Again, I apologize for not being able to cover this series as regularly as I'd like to. Things have been insanely fucking busy for me lately. Like, the stay-at-home dad life is no fucking joke, you know what I'm saying? But I do hope you enjoyed this video nonetheless. If you'd like to subscribe, that'd be great. Consider supporting me on Patreon. It's $5 a month and you get all sorts of goodies and bonuses. And that's everything from me. Much fucking love. Big fucking kisses. Peace.